Well, good morning. I'm Rob Holley, the manager of the Dayton Valley Conservation District, and I'd like to first thank you for joining us. I'd also like to thank the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District and the Carson River Coalition for putting together this series of Watershed Wednesdays. This morning, I'll be discussing Dayton Valley Conservation District's efforts in floodplain management, specifically some recent projects, as well as challenges and strategies for the future. Let me begin with a brief history. Dayton Valley Conservation District began in 1996 as the Middle Carson River Working Group, whose focus was the Middle Carson River within Lyon County. This stretch of river is approximately 37 miles long from the Carson City-Lyon County line in Carson River Canyon to Lahontan Reservoir. After major flooding in the 1950s, the river was significantly modified in the 1960s, with extensive channel work, rerouting, and levee construction, particularly in the Dayton area. The flood in February of 1986 did significant damage to many of those sites, and the river corridor was left in a state of disrepair. The initial function of the working group was to complete a hydrologic study of the Middle Carson River and develop strategies for riparian rehabilitation and future management with a mind toward facilitating agriculture, restoring a healthy riparian system, and buffering against additional major damage to the river channel. Hidden effects of the flooding and channel work included the deposition of significant amounts of mercury, lead, and arsenic into the river system, resulting in a Superfund designation in 1990. The mission of the working group was moving along nicely when a significant event altered the course and scope of their efforts. Enter the 1997 New Year's flood. The 1997 flood completely unwound most of the remaining repairs from the 60s and left an immediate need for repair of irrigation structures, stabilization of the stream bank, and restoration of a now ravaged riparian corridor. Additionally, adjacent agricultural lands and the riparian corridor were inundated with perennial pepperweed, the seed having washed in from upstream with the floodwaters. Formation of the working group led to the establishment of the Dayton Valley Conservation District in 1999. The district has since functioned as an efficient conduit of conservation and riparian funds directed at major stream repair, floodplain restoration, and noxious weed infestations that culminated after the 1997 flood, and again more recently lesser floods in 2006 and twice in 2017. Since its inception, Dayton Valley Conservation District has completed over 50 major stabilization projects, assisted with the repair of irrigation diversions, and successfully battled noxious weeds within Dayton Valley and all of the drainages leading into Dayton Valley. Significant sources of funding have included the Carson Water Sub-Conservancy District, Lyon County, the Carson-Truckee Water Conservancy District, FEMA, the Natural Resources Conservation Service, Nevada State Bond Sales, Nevada Division of Environmental Protection, the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, and Desert Terminal Lakes. This is an example of perennial pepperweed dominating the floodplain. This is a 2009 photo on what was once the Rolling A Ranch. Not only does this photo illustrate the problem with perennial pepperweed that began with the 97 flood, it also illustrates the riparian and floodplain degradation that occurs when there is no effective reclamation strategy, when land is removed from agriculture and irrigation water rights are converted to municipal industrial and subsequently removed from the land. And here we have some healthy floodplain just across the river from the previous site. This healthy stand of native creeping wild rye is an effective competitor against perennial pepperweed, and it provides many riparian and wildlife benefits. It serves as a food source for wildlife and provides nesting and bedding habitat for animals of all types. One of the most vital functions is during flooding, where it lays over under floodwaters, allowing flows to pass over while affording protection to valuable topsoil, keeping much of that soil in place and from entering the stream flow. In January and February of 2017, we experienced 2 moderate floods. This is the Dayton Bridge prior to the crest in January. Since that time, Dayton Valley Conservation District has concentrated on repair and restoration of damages caused by these floods. The Baroni Diversion is located a quarter-mile upstream from the Dayton Bridge. During the course of the floods, the spring runoff, and again in 2019, this diversion was effective in catching over 30 mature cottonwood trees that had fallen from the bank during high water events. Although this is not an intended function of the diversion, had the trees not been caught, they undoubtedly would have ended up getting stuck in the bridge during the height of the flooding. This is a contractor during one of 3 separate removal operations to remove the stranded trees. This particular example is after the January flood and just prior to the second flood, when another pile of trees developed. Pictures simply don't do justice to the size and number of mature cottonwoods removed from the Baroni Diversion. Some were over 3 feet in diameter and approaching 60 feet in length, just the main trunks. These had to be removed in 2 to 3 pieces. The last of the stumps were hauled from the floodplain just this last fall. Also hung up at the Baroni Diversion was this chassis of an aged swather or haymower, the body of an old car, and several culvert pipes that had washed in from somewhere upstream. All of this debris was removed from the river channel and subsequently removed completely from the floodplain. Also in the fall of 2020, we employed a contractor to bolster the downstream face of the Baroni Ditch box culvert. This is at the confluence of El Dorado Canyon, just upstream from Dayton Bridge. The box culvert was installed during the Nevada Department of Transportation bridge widening project in the early 1990s. While it's always been exposed, repeated floodwaters from El Dorado Canyon had begun to undermine the downstream side. This riprap will keep the flow from El Dorado from continuing to undermine the culvert. Here are some examples of repairs made to several of our projects since the 2017 floods. This project is located on the Empi Ranch and was one of the first projects completed after the 1997 flood. Just over 100 feet of the project was lost during the recent floods. This type of repair is made entirely from the bank at low water levels to prevent having to enter the riverbed. This photo from the barns repair illustrates one of the major lessons that we've learned. You can see some of the pinkish rocks are round. Of course, we know that they get that way from rolling and moving water. They never lose their tendency to roll, and as a result, they do not make good material for stream bank repairs. We now use fractured rock that is also very dense, and it stays in place much, much better. This photo was taken just last week. It vividly illustrates several of the challenges to floodplain management in Dayton Valley. The desertification of the former hayfields in the foreground has resulted from the combined loss of irrigation water and the natural dry conditions of our desert valley. Also, on the near side of the bare field is a large pile of cottonwood stumps. These stumps were piled up over 60 years ago when the land was put into hay production. There are many such piles up and down the Middle Carson. Their presence indicates that the floodplain had once seen more frequent flooding and supported natural regeneration of cottonwood trees. The absence of cottonwood regeneration on the floodplain is complex, and it can result from numerous factors, including the loss of irrigation water in surface ditches, river channel modification and rerouting, both natural and man-made, land development, including but not limited to agriculture, drought, etc. In the distance, you can see a housing development on what was once a sagebrush upland like that in the foreground. Proper planning and open communication is vital, as development does reduce the amount of surface for precipitation to absorb. It concentrates runoff, and it provides an avenue for potential contaminants to enter into the stream flow. This has been an overview. of how we got started, what we've been up to, and some of the issues that we face. So what is our strategy moving forward? Many of the large funding sources that we utilized are no longer available. Construction costs have far outpaced our funding levels. So where do we go from here? What we've found over the last few years is that we're good at performing repairs, that we can do it as able on a limited budget, and we have a long list of projects that need fixing. What we don't have is a systematic, objective method of going about that work. Both CWSD and NDEP have funded an evaluation, prioritization, and maintenance program that will allow us to accomplish several important objectives. First, what needs fixing? Beginning this spring, we're going to inventory all of our projects, nearly 50 of them, cataloging and quantifying what needs fixing, and assigning a priority ranking based on multiple criteria. Those criteria might include, but are not limited to, public utility infrastructure, irrigation infrastructure, riparian function, mercury sequestration, nearby buildings, infrastructure, transportation infrastructure, etc. Based on recent work, we can establish cost estimates for each project. Work will then be performed in order of priority and as the budget allows. From this information, we'll also be able to establish an up-to-date inventory and description of projects that can be submitted to Nevada State Lands, to CWSD, and to Lyon County. This accomplishes several objectives. It allows state lands to fulfill their permitting objectives for public projects within their control, and it opens the door to establish the public nature of these projects, with public funds used to complete them, to establish future eligibility for FEMA funding in the event of damage during future flooding. We're excited about where we're going. Funding opportunities are simply not what they were even just a few years ago. Our prioritized approach to maintenance and repair will enable Dayton Valley Conservation District to remain both focused and flexible in the upcoming years as we address our maintenance and repair needs, while also addressing permitting and inventory and future funding after flood events. I really appreciate you joining me today. And again, I wish to thank the Carson Water Subconservancy District and the Carson River Coalition for inviting me to present.